Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this webinar that is focused on manufacturing execution systems. We really appreciate your time. This is a largely intended webinar that there's a lot of interest in this particular technology now. Seems like we can make more parts now than we can manage. So this is the tool to help manage the parts. So what are we going to try to do today? First off, we want to be able to learn why these companies invested in a manufacturing system, execution system. We want to hear how MES has helped their entire business from office to manufacturing and installation. And we also want to learn why the judges at the Atlanta show selected production coach for the Challengers Award. So that's I think that once these owners talk to you about that, you'll see and understand how that could happen. The participants today are commercial interior manufacturers, custom cabinets, Franklin, Homestead. Lutz, they had to bow out. They had a personal problem. The person that was involved was not able to get to the meeting today. So she's not going to be in. Instead, we asked Mick Peters, the project manager for all of these integrations, to talk. And we have Timberline from Manhattan, Kansas in attendance today. The goal is to hear from each one of these companies and find out what happened at their location and hear their before and after. In this particular case with Kent, we'd like to know about his throughput increase, reduction of material handling, and how it's impacted his employee training. So,
can you hear me?
We hear you fine.
Very good. Little background, we started with Production Coach in summer to fall of 2016. We had been considering this type of a technology for some time, but weren't quite convinced that it was going to give us a payback or give us very much bang for our buck. Being the owner, I end up having to fill in the shop whenever we get overwhelmed and do whatever needs to be done. And the most onerous job that typically is in the summer when we're under the gun, because we do a lot of school work. It's sorting parts prior to assembly. You've got, let's say you had 100 cabinets on a job, and each cabinet had 10 parts. There's 1,000 parts now, and you need to find the 10 parts for the first cabinet. So I'm out there in the summer sweating big time, and it's 110 degrees, and I'm sorting all these parts, and I'm laying in bed at night thinking, man, there's got to be a better way to do this. And I remembered the demonstration that had been given to me about Production Coach, and recognized that while sorting parts wasn't really what they were about, the technology was the same. And so I approached them and said, hey, could you do this? And they said, sure, we could do that. And it took them probably about 2 months of testing back and forth between us to get it nailed down. And so the before Production Coach and the after Production Coach are dramatically different. Before Production Coach, we sort parts. It was an absolute huge hassle. It took a lot of time. It took a fair amount of skill. It was a drag. It was no fun to do. It was just a giant mess. The tracking of damaged parts when something was missing or needed repair, it got lost all the time. No one ever knew where it was at or what stage it was in. We would not discover that parts were either missing or damaged until we had already started assembling the cabinets, and then only to discover we don't have the last part that we need, and now we've wasted time on building a cabinet that we can't finish, and then we got to find some place to put all this stuff that now we got to get out of our way so we can start on the next one. Anybody that knows anything about lean manufacturing knows that there's 8 wastes, and we continuously were hitting about 6 out of these 8 wastes that lean talks about. Number one is overproduction, where you're making more of something than you need, or you're making it before you need it. So in our case, we're starting to build a cabinet and now we can't finish it, so that's not good. We're wasting the waste of transportation, where we're moving these parts into the assembly process, and now we got to get them back out of the process. Over-processing, which is where we're doing more than is required at any time. We're not adding any value because now we're touching these parts multiple times. We're wasting motion. There's the waste of waiting, where the employees downstream from us are now waiting because we weren't able to pass the product we'd started on. And then the waste of employee potential, because we're doing all this other stupid stuff our employees can't be adding value. So on a daily basis, we're hitting 6 of the 8 wastes continuously over and over and over again. Our shipping accuracy was poor. When we were supposed to ship 10 products to a job site, we'd invariably multiple times every day end up missing 1 or 2 things off of a shipment, having to make extra shipments. It was just a mess. So after the implementation of Production Coach, when it's now time to sort parts, instead of looking for those first 10 parts and you're touching the same parts over and over and over again, you pick up the very first part in the stack and you scan it, and it tells you where to put it in the rack. And then you touch the next one, and you touch the next one. You're only touching each part once, which means that our sorting time is probably cut, I'm going to say conservatively, by down to 25% of what it was. Our tracking of damaged parts became extremely easy because Production Coach now manages that. And if we have a part that's damaged, it shows up on the screen over at the, in our case, nesting router, or your case, maybe a beam saw, and it tells the operator exactly what part needs to be produced. It spits out a report that has a barcode on it that we scan the barcode. It automatically loads up the program into the CNC. You push the go button and you've got a remade part, which now can be expedited through the process. In addition to that, we now know before we ever start building that work order of cabinets that some parts are missing, which now gives us time before we ever start to get all the parts correct and assembled into one kit before we start building it, which so now we're eliminating all that wasted motion. Our shipments are almost always complete. I went and talked to our truck driver the other day, and I said, so how successful are we now with shipping work orders complete and not having people call up and asking for things they can't find? He said, well, they still ask for things that they can't find, but we're able to prove to them that they signed for it and that it was received. And he said in the last 4 to 5 months, we've only had one time where we actually did not ship something that we thought we had shipped because we put the wrong product label on the wrong product. So it's solved a tremendous number of problems for us. We've had I know this is hard to believe, but a 300% increase in throughput capacity in our assembly department. We're utilizing the same number of people, we're utilizing the same amount of square footage, and we're utilizing the same equipment, but we're able to assemble 3 times as many cabinets in a day as we could prior. Our material handling has been reduced tremendously because we're touching each part one time instead of touching that same stack of parts over and over and over again. And we all know that every time we touch a part and move it, we're increasing the risk of damage. So our damage has gone down. It's an extremely easy program to implement and to train people how to use. It goes very quickly. We're able to take some new employee who comes in off the street and within 5 minutes have them up to speed sorting parts, and they don't need any special training. Before, it would take conservatively weeks to get them good at knowing what all these different parts were and what they were looking, and all that's just gone. Overall, it's sped up our throughput of work through our facility. It's increased our accuracy of delivery, and it's made life just better. I had 2 of my employees, both independently of each other and unprompted, come into my office and say, before we got Production Coach, we thought work was okay. But now that we have Production Coach, if we had to go back to doing it the old way, we would quit and go flip hamburgers. It makes that big a difference.
Okay, well, Kent, thanks for your input. All interesting comments. And Kent, so how long did you say in terms of time, days, to get this installed and running? So
prior to the installer or the installation technician showing up, we had pre-installed all of the computers and pre-installed, downloaded the software and hooked up the barcode scanners. So we did the preparation work, and within a half a day of the technician being here, we were functioning and using it, and he was only here for 1 day, and we were done and using it. So we had a 1-day integration.
Okay. Thanks for your report, Kent. Okay, Caleb from Salt Lake, Homestead, it's your turn. Thanks for joining us.
Can you hear me?
We hear you fine.
All right. My name is Caleb Carpenter. I'm one of the production managers at Homestead Cabinets and Furniture in Hiram, Utah. My particular role in the company is that I focus on process and facility improvement, which is part of why Production Coach caught my eye in the first place. I first ran into it at I think it was a technology conference 2 years ago. A little bit about Homestead. We are a high-end custom cabinet shop. Almost everything we sell goes to prestigious interior designers. So what that means for us is that every job is different. We don't do a lot of producing the same cabinet over and over and over again. Every cabinet's a little different than the one before it. Keeping everything organized on our production floor was something of a challenge. Before Production Coach, we used CNC-based nested CNC routers to cut out all of our parts. And in order to keep things as organized as possible, we were forced to nest the parts in such a way that it kept all the parts for a given cabinet near each other. And then our cutout guys would spend a lot of time making sure the parts were all organized cabinet by cabinet. The edge banding guys would do the same thing, trying to keep them organized before passing them on to the assembly guys. And what this all means was that, first of all, because we weren't nesting for material optimization, we were using a lot more material than we needed to. And it also meant a lot of extra time and effort for our cutout and edge banding guys just to keep nice. All of that trouble notwithstanding, our assembly guys still spent anywhere between 40 and 60% of their time just looking for stuff that was missing. That was a huge hang-up for us. In addition to getting things to assembly on time, we also had a lot of difficulty with making sure that all of the products made it onto the right trailer in time. We had constant arguments with dealers about things that hadn't been shipped and things that hadn't arrived, and it was just a nightmare. So we installed Production Coach, I want to say it was a little under a year ago. And one of the first things we did is we added a sorting area into our process just ahead of assembly. Now our cutout and edge banding guys don't care at all what order they do the parts in. So it actually allows them to organize parts by type instead of by cabinet, which is easier for them to do their various things. And it also means that we can nest parts for material efficiency instead of keeping parts organized. And that's actually saved us, on an average job, somewhere between 1 and 2 sheets of material, which adds up pretty fast. The sorting area makes organizing and sorting all the parts really quick and easy. It makes sure that we never start building a cabinet until all the parts are accounted for. And on the rare occasion that parts are missing, it makes it much easier to track them down because parts are tracked from station to station. So it's easy to look up where a part was last and figure out where it is now. The use of packing lists in our shipping area has made our shipping much more reliable. All those conversations with dealers about things that hadn't been shipped basically don't happen anymore because we always have the paperwork we have the system, we have the record of the part being scanned and loaded onto the truck. But between these two things particularly, the sorting area before assembly and the use of packing lists in shipping have made a huge difference for Homestead. Our last 4 months have been some of our most profitable ever, and in particular, February was a record setter for us. It was the most profitable month in our entire history as a company. It's been a very big difference. Now, about sales support from RSA and WebCab, our particular facility is very complex because of the variability of the jobs that we do. And so getting Production Coach integrated in the first place was something of a challenge. But during that process, RSA and WebCab both were very responsive. They were very helpful. Our case manager was Sean Mayberry, and our installer was Dudley Petrie, and both of them were always readily available. They always responded to quick mails and phone calls. In particular, and one thing that I especially like that both companies do is they make extensive use of screen sharing when trying to solve a software problem, which makes it easier for us to work on it from both ends. Easier for me to show them what the problem is, easier for them to communicate the solution back to me, and it really works pretty well. Because we're as complex as we are, we've ended up having to ask for a number of development requests from RSA Solutions. In particular, right off the bat, one of the reasons our installation was so difficult was because a particular quirk of how we use our software, our cabinet design software, Microvellum, made it so that barcodes didn't work properly when they were imported into Production Coach. And RSA Solutions, if they had wanted to, could have told us you're using Microvellum wrong, you're on your own. But instead, they developed an entirely new feature within Production Coach to allow us to continue using Microvellum the way we were, even though it was weird, and saved us a lot of trouble and a lot of rearranging. And so that made it a lot easier than it could have been, and we appreciate their willingness to work around that issue. For the future, our facility, we have a goal to go completely paperless on the production floor. which right now we use these thick, complex packets for every job, and we print out hundreds and hundreds of pages every day. In order to do that, we need more capabilities than are currently built into Production Coach. Sean Mayberry and their development, I think his name is Jonathan, are both very responsive, and they're both very willing to hear new ideas. I have a long list of things that I've asked for from them. They're always responsive. They always have a positive reaction. So I'm quite confident that in the future we'll be able to transfer all the information that we currently have in our packets entirely into Production Coach and be able to just use paper at all at our facility. And I'm very excited about that possibility.
That's great, Cal. I really appreciate your report. If you guys have questions, just go ahead and type them in. We'll get to them as we get through the presentations. Next, we have Brian Jones of Franklin Building Supply. Brian?
Yeah, can everybody hear me?
Hear you fine.
Yeah, so I'm the cabinet GM at Franklin Building Supply. We are a pro lumber yard located in Boise, Idaho, and we've got locations spread across the state of Idaho and into Nevada. We bought this program in early 2017, and really we're looking to keep track of parts, but not from a sorting standpoint, but we are a design firm with a panel process shop, and then we have a third party do all of our finishing. So we're moving lots of parts, custom parts. All of our panels we're sending them out of our facility into another facility, getting them finished and getting them brought back to us, along with another third-party product being shipped to that same finisher and then brought back to us at the same time. So we were struggling with getting all the parts to the vendor that needed finished at the same time, aligned with all the other products that we're getting there at the same time, and then getting everything back here in time to go through final assembly and get on a truck so we could get them to our job sites and have an OTIF, or an on-time in full delivery. Our installers were extremely frustrated with the fact that they didn't have the stuff to do their job. It was creating just chaos in our organization, major frustration on almost all employees. We're hiring extra people trying to manage the chaos, and we were looking for something to say, hey, did we get everything on that truck? Did it actually ship? Did we get everything back when it came from the vendor? Did we actually receive everything in? And did we receive all the third-party components, whether it be crown moldings or cabinet doors? And do we have all those? And were we able to make the truck? And it was a major challenge for us, and a challenge almost to the point that we didn't know if we were going to be able to make it through the growth, because we had tried checklists and everybody trying to do everything to really try to make sure it was on there, but for some reason we just could not get it accurate. In Atlanta in 2016, I came across Production Coach, and I had been looking for quite some time, realized the software, and I was like, that is it. So our focus on initial install was we just want to be able to have a list and be scanning when we're shipping parts out, receiving parts in, and then shipping the truck and making sure that. And we were, the install went great. The gentleman that installed it, the amount of depth that he had of a manufacturing facility and cabinets had a huge impact on his ability to help with that install. It went amazingly well. And we were creating lists and scanning, and within a couple days, it was actually quite impressive. And we've been able to manipulate Cabinet Vision to create the list that we want in Production Coach on the front end. And the flexibility that Production Coach offers is got a huge effect on our ability to really manage that list all the way down to fast caps and shelf pins and every item you can imagine. We have figured out how to get on that list and itemize on that list. And today, when you look at the system, it's a rarity that we don't ship a cabinet job in full. We're doing 2 to 3 kitchens a day, and it's had a huge impact on our financial success, our team environment, their ability to know what to do and when to do it and how to do it, and the real true functionality of that and the priorities of that. And so today, I mean, there's no way we could do the volume that we do today and that we're looking to do. We're in the process of looking to double our capacity again, and we've already got equipment on the way and arriving to be able to go to six sets of cabinets and with just a couple different tweaks of equipment. And there's no way we could keep track of the 70,000 pieces that we cut and move a day, let alone 140,000. So keeping track has been great. And then as we've gone, once we got that figured out, we kind of started at that end and have brought back in. And so one real thing that ties into the impact on an organization and the lead times was the calendar section of Production Coach, which allows us to say, hey, here's the process when everybody should be doing these things. If this is your day, here's your day. We've been able to define capacity at almost a certainty that we can pull it off and shorten our lead times. We were running lead times that were 8, 10, 12 weeks out and then still struggling to have them complete. Today, we've got a 2-week process time, a 3-week lead time that we can hit with no problem, even at that volume, and have been able to accomplish that because of the clarity of the organization to the individuals. Production coaches allowed us to have the employee that's actually doing the work and doing the added value for our end user has the ability to go to the calendar and say, this is what I have on the books today. I got to have this done. And we've made a commitment to them when we went to this that we would not commit more work on any given day than they could actually do. We didn't want to overwork them. We were running in this transition up to 2 shifts and 16 hours a day. And in the last 12 months, we've been able to shrink that down to 8 hours a day and actually only 6 hours of actually manufacturing time with 20 less people than we had before. And a substantial 20% growth in that time period. So the effects on lead times and organization and the overall picture, there's no way we could do that. And for us, the ability to use the calendars to drive production scheduling and to give the clarity to each individual so they can find what they need to do has been priceless. I mean, it has really had a huge effect on our business.
Wow. Nice report, Brian. I didn't realize that it impacted you that much. So you literally downsized your production team by 20 people and increased your production by 20%, went from 2 shifts to 1 shift. Did I hear all that right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, it has had a crazy impact. My production manager, when I said I wanted to go to a 2-week lead time, he's been in the cabinet business for years. His dad owned a cabinet shop with him growing up. And he looked at me and said I was absolutely crazy with that approach. And today, when we say what we do, when we've toured some shops, and they always say, is that really possible? He's like, it's funny to watch him talk about it because he says, I know it doesn't sound doable, but we do it every day. So I know it's possible because it's just challenging that status quo.
Yeah, interesting. Well, Brian, thanks for your information and your report. Again, guys, if you have a question, go ahead and type it in. We'll be getting to that. Okay, commercial interiors manufacturing, they were one of our first ones to install. Austin, the floor is yours.
Hi, I'm Austin. I'm a COO here at Commercial Interiors Manufacturing. We make a lot of kind of unique products where our main customer is quick service restaurants, and we do all the interior millwork, things like interior doors, ceiling elements, wall paneling, solid surface products. Casework is something in 2016 we decided to kind of expand our business into. So we don't have too much of a how were we doing it before, but we had the opportunity to come to these seminars, look at different types of machinery, softwares, and pick which ones were the best to position us in a position to be state-of-the-art manufacturer. So we chose Production Coach to kind of help us get cabinets done. Kind of like everybody else, the implementation was very short, and the structure that it provided us, I mean, we weren't doing it before, so it's kind of hard to imagine it, but the organization it gave us is just impossible to imagine trying to do it without it. One thing we're right now and kind of in the middle of doing, because Caseworks is such a small portion of our business, is we're going to be expanding Production Coach to everything else in our shop, which is mostly nothing that goes through design. It's all just stuff printed off a work order, certain quantities of different products. But it's pretty unique in the fact that just about everything we make takes different part flows through the shop, but we really see applications for Production Coach to track all that stuff and pull it all together and help organization. Even though it's typically sold to casework manufacturers, there's a big application in all the random things that just get printed and don't get designed. One area that we're kind of having an issue that we're looking to make a pretty big impact is when we do interior doors. It's really hard to track. We may have 10 different colors and 5 different sizes going on every day, and it gets difficult to track did everything get done and that we didn't miss one piece. We work on very short lead times, so if we get down to assembly and realize we missed something, it really hurts. Right now our guys have checklists. It's very manual. They have to stick work orders on so they're visible, go back after the fact, review a checklist, compare that to the schedule. Kind of like Kent mentioned about lean, one big thing lean talks about is quality at the source, building things like checklists into your work process so you're not going after the fact and reviewing it and now you got to start back at the beginning to get a part made. We really see the Production Coach to have applications there, so just with one look at the screen, our guys can see, oh, I missed the door. I better go ahead and get that done before I get everything finished, and then we got to start from scratch. We're in the middle of getting all that done, but we really feel very confident that it's going to add a huge impact to what's really 90% of our business we do here, and in a pretty unique way that you don't so often see it talked about. So excited for the future of that and all the applications that that's going to allow us to organize and pull together in our business.
Great. Thanks a lot. We appreciate your report, Austin. Chris is not here. Not sure what happened. I didn't get a call or anything, but apparently something came up and he was not able to make it. Also, the person from, Lutz Woodworking was not able to make it, but I did want to put it out there that the reason that Greg Lutz purchased Production Coach was to deal with his job site management. And he actually purchased it before that release came out. But now we're actually scanning the products onto the truck, or you can use RFID. And then you can scan it off of the truck to prove that it was there. And there's a report that gets printed out to prove that, okay, it's all there. So he delivers his own. But contractors were constantly, well, I guess it's commonplace. There was always challenges as to whether it got there or not. Well, this puts water all over that fire because it's proof that it was actually delivered there. And then the third process would be to scan it up onto the installation of the facility. So that was an interesting development that he's successfully done. He's also deployed some technology that his scanners on the job site are actually cell phone scanners where he can scan it and it'll automatically. I think what he does is he makes a list and then he downloads it into the system afterwards. This system is kind of a hybrid. It runs in the building on a network, and then it runs in the clouds. So you have kind of a mixed or a hybrid type installation. So that's basically, I wanted to make sure that information got out there. I asked Mick Peters to join us today. Mick he oversees our installations, and he makes sure he's the project manager for anybody that buys Production Coach, works with Mick in a scheduled, process, structured way to make sure everything gets identified, responsibilities get assigned, and the mission gets achieved. And all this happens with the clear understanding that there's going to be changes along the way, and those changes will also be achieved as they're identified. So, Mick, I'm going to give you the floor.
Thanks, Raj. So, everybody has been talking about their implementation successes and the short amount of time. Part of that is, the product is just very nicely focused and can be set up quite quickly. It's extremely flexible. But let me just give you a little background first on why that's so important. My history goes back to actually running factories just like some of the other people that are on this panel, and been involved in putting systems in, some of them pretty big. I've been in some of the larger manufacturing companies, and you can make a good decision to buy a product, whether it's a piece of hardware or whether it's something software systems. But if you don't have a good plan to put it in well, to integrate it with everything, then it doesn't really give you the same return on investment that it could potentially if you had that. So part of what we do is put together a planning process that helps to put all this together. It actually helps people to think through what they actually want. It's so easy to sit around and say, okay, we need this kind of a system, and here's the kinds of results. But if I don't have the exact details of how that's going to actually work, then when it comes time to integrate it, there's a lot of questions. Things don't work correctly. And remember, we're doing a lot. We're making connections from starting with the engineering software that we have to import, and has already been brought out by a couple of the people here have stated that has to be dialed in. There are things that can be done on that end that improves the content of what's in Production Coach, brings in more data. So there's some thinking on that. How's that going to work? And then when you get on the shop floor, you've got all kinds of variables. So the process that we use, so what we're going to look at here is kind of a standard process, really, that most kinds of large implementations follow. And I've got a little diagram that I want to show that shows the 5 stages of the implementation process from getting started to going live. All right, so here we go. That's what this graphic represents, those 5 stages of an implementation process. And it doesn't matter whether you're putting a big accounting system in, or an ERP system, or any kind of major change in your operations. I think you want to start with a preliminary, let's put the basic specs together, let's get a timeline together, what do we want? Then a planning stage where we put all that into a clear plan that outlines how this is going to work. And then an assemble stage where we take all the elements and start to put the thing together, install the software, set up the scanners and so forth. And then we move into a validation stage. Now we're going to test this. Is our assumption correct? Is the data coming through correct? Any adjustments need to be made? We call that validate stage. And then that leads us to this go live stage where we're actually going to be able to run production jobs. This is very important to go through step by step and test this. If you skip over some of this stuff and just try to go live, you know, how many of you have installed systems, whether even hardware, where a technician arrives, the meter's running, it's very expensive and so forth, and you go, oh, wow, we didn't test something. We're missing something. And here's this expensive technician just standing there waiting because somebody forgot, whatever, and now you're stuck. By going through this process step by step and checking everything and double checking, we actually avoid a lot of that. Just the same way the customers ultimately avoid some of the costs, you know, of missed products and part sorting and so forth through the use of the system. So I want to show really quick how we get to a plan that actually does this. This is actually one of the project plans that we did recently for one of our customers who's now up and running. I'm leaving off the first page that describes what the customer bought and all of that, but you can see that the plan starts with a summary describing in words, this is what we want to do. This is our goal. Here's how we want to get our money back for the investment that we're making. We want to do sorting. We want to do all of these different kinds of things. And then we look at, here's a floor plan. In this case, our customer provided us with a drawing of this the floor plan with some notes on here as to how that things flow and where they thought it would make sense to start to measure things. well, we've got a CNC over here, and this is where the operator stands, and we want to be able to scan stuff there and so on. So we've got this now. We've got a little bit of an understanding of what the facility looks like, and we write up a step-by-step, this is station-by-station description of the operation. So here's what's being done in engineering. Here's what's being done over in panel processing. We got a little excerpt of the drawing. And so in words, we're describing all of this stuff. While we're doing this, both parties are involved. I'm involved, our technicians are on our side, and on your side, the engineering department, the production manager, everybody's looking at this. Is that what we're talking about? Is that really what we want? And we edit this and get it to a working document. So we've sorted out a lot of the ideas here on paper of what we want to do. By the way, this is Lutz, and this is, talking about how they want to be able to scan a loading truck and scan at the site and so forth. And then we do a simple flow chart that's going to show just block diagram of the different stations and their basic functionality. Here's what we want at the panel saw and the router. Got some other stuff going on here that's not going to be monitored by production coach, and then we move into sorting station. And then we've got various lines, various paths, just like many shops do. It's not just a linear thing. We've got case clamps over here making cabinet bodies. And while that's going on, we've got a door station and a drawer station. We're doing sorting at all of those things, and we're marrying all of that up at the final assembly to make all that click. This is the stuff that has been already brought out by a number of people, starting with Kent at Timberline, about how streamlining these processes and making sure that we're not making the wrong stuff in the wrong order, so it's getting in the way of our everything now marries up at final assembly in a harmonious way, in a measured way, and then moves through the other steps, now to staging, now to shipping, and so on. And we take all of that information, we put that into a chart that the customer then can use as a checklist. Again, okay, if we're going to do this way at the router, we got to buy a PC and put a scanner there. And same thing at the sorting station and at the case clamp. We got to have a label printer because we're going to put product labels on there. So it's my job to kind of put all that stuff together and put this in a summary form where our customers then have a nice checklist to validate, is this what we want? And then to actually go out and buy the corresponding hardware, make sure that all of this is coordinated so that when our technician arrives, he's not going, hey, you got your scanners right? You go, what scanners? So that's the goal. In a very short presentation. This is what we do as far as project management in order to ensure that everything moves along at the right pace. And then after that, it's passed over to one of our technicians who then has a roadmap to look at. He's not going to arrive and say, hey, guys, well, how would you like production coach to work? No, he's got all that. Just like you get signed off from your customer a drawing that says, this is the way I want this kitchen to look, or this is the way I want this break room to look. We need the same thing here. And if we do that, then everything works. All the manufacturing works and the installation works. Okay, Raj, thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Mick. Again, if there are any questions for Mick, go ahead and type them in. We're at the stage now where we can start taking questions and getting them answered. What I'm going to do is read the question out and then pass it out to participants of the meeting and see what their answers would be. And then if we can't get it answered, then we'll from the developer. The first one is, how do you track finished parts, presuming it's difficult to place barcodes on products being finished? Anybody have an answer for that one?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Roger.
Okay, go ahead.
So one thing that we have done is we have our CNCs drilling a hole on the finished part where it will end up being hidden on the cabinet during, whether it be on the outside or where it's inside the cabinet layout. Then we have the CNC operator actually puts that label there. After sanding, we actually use just a piece of clear packaging tape and allows that part to go to finish. And when it comes out, we can just use a utility knife or a putty knife to scrape off the finish. It flakes off the packaging tape and allows you to continue to scan. So
Cool. Okay. Any follow-up questions on that? Just go ahead and type them in. The next question is, what are the options for advanced sorting options, sorting by part, such as size, instead of by product, the cabinet? Anybody have an answer for that one? I know there are secondary sorting operations. I don't have the answer for that exactly. I will get it out to everybody after I find it out. I'm not sure if they have it sorting by size, but they do.
Raj, yes. May I address that?
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Nick.
advanced sorting is something not very many companies use it, but it expands on what the standard sorting system does. And so the additional things that it can do is, number one, graphically you can design. When we do sorting today in a standard system, you can set up any number of sorting racks with various criteria, and they're organized by rows and columns. But that's it. It's just rows and columns. You may have seen more complex patterns. Those complex patterns are only possible with the advanced sorting system. In the graphics, the way that works, the advanced sorting system has the ability to break up your sorting racks in a more complex pattern. It's not often necessary, and there's a lot of workarounds, so that's not a huge deal. The other one, though, is being able to, without any special formulas and things like that, to be able to sort by size. Just looking at the size of the part, make a decision that it goes into a particular slot. And so those are the two main characteristics of advanced sorting that, compel somebody to maybe upgrade to that. Those are the two major functionalities.
Thanks, Mick. The next question was, we are also interested in adding hardware to Production Coach and printing labels with bill of materials on them to scan to the pallet. This will help eliminate paperwork for us. How would we add hardware pieces to Production Coach?
Hey, Roger, I can help with that as well.
Go ahead.
We have done that in our engineering software. We use Cabinet Vision. In the order entry side of Cabinet Vision, we are able to create drag and drop items to say, hey, this is the hardware. We want these into what we'll call a detached or a non-assembly item. And we really create all of that up front. And so once the import happens, it shows up in Production Coach. For us, we wanted it to happen in one place. So Production Coach runs as it's the tracking system, but we're not doing any creation of any products at Production Coach. We're using one engineering software to do it. And then you can palletize those as those parts arrive into kits, however you would like, so that when you ship it out, it's all included.
Great. Thank you for that.
You also have the ability to actually create a piece of hardware right in Production Coach if you need to add something manually after the fact. We do that frequently, but just like the previous individual mentioned, all the bulk of the hardware comes automatically pre-stoked into Production Coach when we import the work order. So 99% of it is all automatically brought in and prepared ahead of time.
Thanks, Kent. The next question is, my understanding is that Production Coach doesn't do any purchasing inventory management. What has been your solution to do this? Well, I'm going to go ahead and take that one on. Production Coach is really not going to be an MRP system in the near future. What we've looked at the big picture if you think about it in terms of getting business and then engineering business and then managing it and then purchasing the materials. What we're saying is that on the front end at estimating or at if it's internet sales or whatever, it's going to develop a demand for materials. Either it's going to be a configure to order demand or it's going to be an estimated engineer to order demand. We're advocating that this system, we end up pushing that into an ERP, MRP system, as well as entering it into the engineering system. So what's going to happen is that, and by the way, we're using Epicor as our ERP model to communicate with in terms of Production Coach. So what hasn't really been exploited much by our 30 customers in the United States is Production Coach's ability to communicate and send out orders and building instructions and videos and stuff like that on a need-to-know basis, where the employee is actually he's building something for the first time. He can actually see a 3D picture of it with instructions and sometimes even a video. But we have toured factories in Canada where this has been fully deployed, and they manage. What they do is they assume or they associate activities with material consumption, and Production Coach can be set up in a fashion that whenever any specific event happens, as it gets scanned in or whatever, it can send out a message. So one of the things that I sensed in the owners' presentations is that the employee morale goes way up as they're not having to deal with the frustrations of oops, or what do I do now? This thing, Production Coach tends to think ahead and communicate as it's running. We sent 4 of our sales team up to Canada to tour some more mature installations, and one of them was doing $20 million with 20 people in the factory, and I said, how could that possibly be? And I didn't get to see it, but my rep was telling me, Roger, they have video and TV sets all over the place, and those TV sets are telling these guys what to do, and they're walking around as they're not wasting any time at all. And I just find that so even though this is good, it can get better as we mature and get better at what we do down here. I can assure you that there's a lot of cream that has yet to rise to the top with this technology, and so they're going ahead and moving forward with it. In terms of actually Production Coach doing MRP, don't look for that, but what you can look for is connectivity to an MRP system from Production Coach. It has a very, very open architecture, and it can be triggered to send out real-time messages for consumption of materials, and knowing that I can only tell you that with Epicor, we're going to have Epicor be the green light. So when all the materials are there and the labor is there and everything, it's going to green light the work order to enable it to go out to the factory. If it can't green light it, there's something holding it up, and it'll tell you what's holding it up. So that's our long-term plan. That rollout we should be ready for that in the next 3 or 4 months. So that's that question. Let me get to the next one. Can you demonstrate the production planning capabilities of Production Coach? Yes, we can. I don't have it in this system, but we will contact you and whoever else needs to see a demonstration of it to show you an in-depth detail of how you can drag and drop on a Google Calendar, and it does backdating. So if I want to schedule a job to go out a week later, say 7 days, I can just drag the shipping date up 7 days, and all the stress on the cells moves with it. So and it's easy to show. I believe there's a video on our website right now that demonstrates that. But we'll get back to you and arrange for a time to show it to you. Has anyone implemented Production Coach for millwork processes or just casework? Yeah, they have. Kent, you're doing millwork, aren't you?
Yes, we use it to, once again, we make a work order in Microvellum, and it spits out a list of how many linear feet of this molding and this molding and this molding, and each one of them is a product, and we use it to track it and to wrap it and store it and ship it.
Yeah, actually, it's a pretty easy challenge for Production Coach. I don't know anyone that didn't buy it for that. Again, inventory management question. Is anyone using Cutright along with Production Coach? Yes.
Timberline does.
Timberline does. Because of our partnership with Styles and WoodCAD CAM, a lot of our customers are using Cutright along with that. So it's doable. Let's see.
Hey, Roger, I got something to add to that one. That's actually part of how I mentioned that we're using it for some different products we have. We do windowsills for restaurants where customers want them cut to specific sizes that we're running through Cutright, and they're labeled. So each window will be like A, B, C, D, E going around the restaurant, and they have their own sizes on it. So we'll be using Production Coach to input that stuff in Cutright, send it to the saw, export it to Production Coach so our customer gets a label generated at the saw that corresponds with where that goes in the store. But that's the reason we bought the Excel import, which may be something to mention, but it makes it seamless to go from Cutright into Production Coach.
Great. Thank you for that. Another question is, how many companies in the United States and Canada are using Production Coach? The answer to that is right now, I believe we've got about 35 installed, up and running. We're batting 100%. Anyone that's bought it is up and running. We have, and I don't know the answer to Canada. We have 17 more installations pending. So far, the beauty of what we're doing is I haven't had a failure yet. And I don't intend to have a failure. And these guys are very good at what they do. We're very organized on the front end with project management, and we have very capable people in the field that are problem solvers. They've owned their own business twice, and very smart, creative people. You'll never know exactly what exactly it is you're going to end up with, because our team actually solves a lot of problems that you may not see, you may not think it's important, but we make happy people, that's for sure. So I think that this is an amazing technology developed by some pretty creative developers. Another one is, has Cutright integrated better than Cabinet Vision? Half dozen one, six of the other. I'm not sure if it makes any difference. Once you get it, it works. So the question is Cutright better than Cabinet Vision to hook up to? We have both, so it's not we don't consider it to be a major challenge either way. Also with WoodCAD CAM and with Microvellum, sometimes the data has to be adjusted a little bit, but our team is yet to. They've been challenged, but they've never failed. So will it work with BOM exports from SolidWorks? The solution with SolidWorks is you go through RouterSim. RouterSim, we're looking for some data. And if you're using a scanning system from RouterSim, RouterSim can create data for us to use. And both of those, we haven't done that yet, but that's the way we would do it. If somebody came to us and said, I got to have it, and I'm using Solid Modeling, SolidWorks or Inventor, and it's real easy to get it done with RouterSim. Our two companies go back 25 years. We're friends, and as soon as that project comes up, these guys have already started talking about it. Here's one. Where Production Coach come from? Hold on. I can't read the rest of it. Production Coach. What happens is this is John. John, what happens is that the integration comes from the United States and RSA, and the support comes out of Canada. And what happens is when we show up, we'll get you running and all of that. And usually it takes 3 to 5 days. And then after that, there's a communication that takes place between our integration person and their support person. And then you use the support person from there on. The integration person at at RSA and the support team at Webcab in Canada, they're talking all the time about different accounts and stuff like that. We pretty much, once we get it up and running and everything like that, there aren't a whole tremendous amount of calls, but what does happen is that the owners are thinking about better ways to utilize the technology, adding more systems into it and functionality. So, in fact, I have not received, as owner of RSA, I have not received one call saying that they have a problem with support. What type of RFID hardware and tags have you integrated with? I do not know the answer to that, but I do know that that's a very, very specific technology that Canada says this is what you have to use. The bottom line is that we're comfortable with one brand, and I will get that brand out there to you. And the same goes for the labels, and also we've got about 4 or 5 companies using RFID for the products and sub-assemblies, but now we're headed into the part world, and that's going to be even more dramatic. So kind of exciting to see the industry actually move in that direction. But I don't know the exact brand of the equipment that we use, so I will get that information out to you. Oh, what is the base price of Epicor? There isn't a base price of Epicor. We actually come and do a discovery and figure out exactly what it is you need, whether you want to have it on premise or whether you want to have it in the cloud, and how you want to make what you want to connect it with, and what you're trying to achieve. Best thing to do is have one of our reps call you, Michael, and set up a meeting to go through this with you. That is not one thing that you can easily answer, because we have to know exactly what the mission is, where the help is needed most, and what you're trying to achieve. Let me see. There's another question. On a case assembly line, is the software able to organize, create a pallet for shipment, or is it up to the individual to manually organize and sort and create a shipping kit? The way it works is that you can put the products on a pallet, and then you can make the parts that are on the pallet become a kit, and the pallet is a kit, and you scan the pallet onto the truck, and it takes all the parts that have been scanned onto the pallet with it. Does RSA sell Epicor? No, we actually use it as a reference. We get Epicor involved. We set up the times to get together and all of that. We really, the way Epicor is, it's $1 billion company. And so they're kind of like AutoCAD in that they have third-party developers. And we have teamed up with a third-party developer. That's their #1 integrator in the world. And they're called Creative. And they have a team of 70 people. And they have a large team of integrators that also write code for custom applications. We are not interested in trying to create a bunch of custom applications. We feel that Epicor has all of the technology that's needed by the industry. It's just a matter of picking out what you want to deploy and connecting everything together. Creative it's very difficult for Creative to sell into the woodworking industry because they don't have that relationship with the machinery people like we do. They're not that familiar with cut-right, pattern systems, 2020, cabinet vision, cabinet wear. It just goes on and on that what we know and have lived with for the past 20 years, they're not familiar with that. So they recognize that, and so they've asked us to work with them, and we're very impressed with what they're able to do. It's not a development thing. It's an integration thing. And so we're developing a presentation and to show how all this stuff works together. And that's where we're at on that one. Okay, this is a question to the panel. Knowing what you know now, what would you do different? So Austin, let's start with you on that.
Maybe could you clarify a little bit what you're looking for there?
I think what he's saying is while you went through the learning process of deploying an MES system, you learned a bunch of stuff. So based on what you learned, what would you do different now?
Oh, we would have.
I have an answer to that.
Earlier from the get-go. Caseworks never really took off like we expected, but when we would run a job with it and use it, it was like so crucial. And keeping everything organized that I wish 2 years ago we would have started doing it to the rest of the shop, because in the smaller scale aspects we've used it in there, it's made a huge impact. And it was a little bit hard to get past how it's kind of structured, like it's for a cabinet job where you need to sort parts when a lot of our parts might not need to take that flow. But using it and those other things has just provided so much benefit. I wish we did it sooner.
Okay, thanks, Austin. Brian, did you want to chime in on this?
Yeah, I can chime in. The one thing that I mean, from our standpoint, I think the biggest challenge that we faced was getting the true craftsmen of our industry, the guys that have been doing it for a while, to buy into how much technology can change their world to the positive. And to do that differently, I would have spent more time getting their buy-in and understanding what the implementation process was before we launched it. Once they've used it, they wouldn't go back, but if we could have got their buy-in up front, it would have made things implement even faster than they went.
Thanks, Brian. So getting buy-in is really important. I can add to that with Greg Lutz's Lutz Woodworking. I know that he foresaw that, and he literally took his whole company on a tour of system before they actually, or in the same week they were implementing it, and got everybody excited about it because he says there was a natural resistance to his, and he actually had feedback coming back to him saying, I wish we had done this 2 years ago rather than waited. So it's kind of interesting. Caleb, did you have something?
I do. One thing that I don't know if anyone's mentioned today, but Production Coach is built to be very modular. You have the option of buying basically as many stations as you like or as few. I think there's a base package of 3 stations or something like that. When we first were setting up Production Coach, we got all excited about it. We actually bought 14 stations right off the bat and tried to implement them in every department that we had. And if I were to do it over again, I think I would have actually started smaller. I'd have bought a base package, a handful of stations, a sorting station, and tried implementing it in a couple of key points first. And then once we learned some of the quirks and ins and outs of the software, begun working on getting it out to other parts of the shop. It's very easy to purchase additional stations and set them up and integrate them with the rest of the system you have already after the initial install. And so, yeah, that's what I would have done. We would have started much smaller and expanded out over the time as we got more familiar with the system.
Okay, thanks. I know that up in Canada, they're talking about suggesting that we do that. Try to limit people, just get them started, and then actually expand it out later on. Kent, do you have anything to add to that?
I'm just the opposite of what he said. We bought 5 seats initially, and by the end of the very first day, we had and ordered 5 more seats because we had saw the value and what we could do elsewhere. The only other thing I wish we could have done differently if we had a time machine was go back and buy it 10 years prior. Of course, it didn't exist then, but have no regrets one way at all.
Okay, thanks a lot, Kent. Well, we're kind of over past due on time. I really appreciate the panelists contributing to this webinar, and appreciate everybody attending. If you have time, please fill out the feedback questionnaire. We're anxious to serve, and also for any unanswered questions, we will get to those and get you your responses. Thanks again for your time. Our next session is in 2 weeks. It's going to be on estimating. have some technology to talk about on that, tying into what I talked about earlier with Epicor and so on and so forth. Thanks again for your time. We really appreciate it.